Okay, Mark, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure.
We spoke about this back when I first started doing the podcast. We spoke about doing this, and I obviously before this whole Corona stuff, I like to do more face to face and in person, but that's no longer an option at the moment. And I just thought, what's the point in not doing them when people have got so much time on their hands? We might as well get together. So yeah, here we are.
Brilliant. No, it's a great idea, and I think it's a nice thing. It kills some time for everybody, but hopefully people will enjoy listening to us rambling about anything. So why not?
Exactly. That's the thing. I do these, and people say all the time to me, like, "Oh, what if no one listens?" And it's like I say to people, I don't care. Like I don't. If nobody listens, I really just don't care. It's one of those things. I speak to people who I really enjoy speaking to, and from there, this podcast comes about. If people want to listen to it, superb, and I really appreciate the people who do and the people who give me feedback. And if people don't want to listen to it, hey ho, like we've still had a great chat.
Excellent. Good stuff.
How's stuff with you during this whole thing, mate? Like with work and personally, how's it? How are you managing with everything?
Yeah, pretty good to a degree. I think I have to say I'm in a really fortunate position in that I still get to go to work. I appreciate that's not the case for everybody. Not full time. I've had to split the team here at Wildwood in two, so straight down the middle, with animal keeper staff and the ranger team, just to really respect social distancing and ensuring that if I've got one group of people that have to isolate, it's not going to affect the day-to-day management of species like bears and wolves and everything else that we keep here in the park. So we've got to come in, manage a very large and growing animal collection in the middle of a breeding season as well. So I think in that respect, it's business as usual to some degree. Well, business as unusual, I think, is probably the phrase that's been most recently coined, and I think that's about right. It's very strange, no visitors, minimal staffing, but I've got to say, getting out of the house is I'm very fortunate to be able to do that because kids are driving me mad.
It's what you've got now is you've gone from working in a zoo environment with wild animals that are enclosed to now working at home with kids that are now becoming wild animals enclosed.
And you're enclosed with them, yeah. So it's an absolute nightmare. So yeah, no, I'm really lucky, and it's should never take that for granted. It's an important thing that we're doing, and I think every animal collection, big, small, whatever, all around the world at the moment, they've got to look after those animals, and I think we're in a fortunate position still to be able to do that and get some space away from, get your own time back.
Yeah, definitely. So for the purposes of people listening, what is your job title and your job role, mate?
Okay, so I'm head of living collections for the Wildwood Trust, which is predominantly a conservation organisation. We've got two large parks in Kent and Devon. The predominant focus is on native species or species that have existed in the UK since the last ice age. So we've got species like European brown bear, wolves, lynx. We do a lot of work with red squirrels, so we've provided animals for the release projects. Same with pine martens as well. So in the Forest of Dean with the project, some of the animals bred here then went on to breed again and produced animals for the release programs. And we hazel dormouse. Beavers in Kent and Devon contributed to a lot with that. So it's really looking at native species and wilding projects, big rewilding projects that put animals back into the British landscape where they can do what they should be doing. And that's part of what we're doing at the moment. We wouldn't like to say rescue work as such. We're just doing a big project in the Devon Park at the moment. We've got two young bear cubs that were abandoned in Albania. The Albanian Wildlife Rescue did an amazing job, absolutely incredible. These two very young animals, they were found in a snowdrift. It looks like the adult female had been startled by illegal logging. She's moved on. She's climbed through this snowdrift, abandoned two very, very young cubs. The Albanian Wildlife Rescue Team had been monitoring them very closely, but temperatures were dropping significantly. The mum wasn't coming back, so they've taken them in, given them a lot of care, and they've come into contact with us via a Belgian rescue centre to see if we take the animals here. It's something we've done before. We built nearly 2-acre forest with ponds and streams, and done a lot of studies on behavioural studies on torpor and diet for European brown bears. And we think we're in a very strong position to take on these two cubs. So that's what we're currently working on at the moment. Probably these two cubs were once classed as the unluckiest bear cubs in Europe because so many rewilding attempts took place to try and put them back both in Albania, then again in Romania. All of that fell through. And then now I think they're pretty lucky they're going to get an amazing home. So we're working through a lot of project work with that at the moment.
So how old sort of bears are now?
They're about 8.5 months at the moment. By the time they come to us, which is building a huge facility specifically for them, it would be about 2 acres of woodland, pond and streams to mirror what we've got in Kent already. And I think that'll be around about September time. So we're looking at about 14 months old.
Wow, it's amazing that orphan bears from somewhere like Albania then end up here, and that could be the future of bear population throughout the UK. So is that rewilding project confirmed, or is it just something that's just you're trying to put it together so it can go ahead?
Well, not so much for that specifically with bears. What we're doing with these bear cubs is providing a home for animals that would probably end up most likely in a zoo somewhere without being disrespectful, in third-rate accommodation to be gawped at by visitors. What we're trying to do is provide a natural area of forest to give these animals a life, to give them the kind of habitat that they would have. So their main purpose will be to really give them a life, but also to be able to show how bears live in the wild and do the visit to experience element with that. So people come and see them. The wilding projects that we work on at the moment, actually probably the biggest one we've got in the pipeline that we're really excited about. Not confirmed at the moment, I have to say that, and I can't go into too many details on it. But the one we're really looking at, and it's all guns blazing for, is bison as part of the Wilder Kent project in collaboration with Kent Wildlife Trust. We've been looking at the feasibility studies around releasing bison into an area of woodland attached to Wildwood Trust land that is owned by Kent Wildlife Trust. I've been working out myself in the Netherlands with Kent Wildlife Trust and some of my team here, just to see what it looks like, because actually in the UK, a lot of the time, in many places, we've forgotten how to live with wildlife, and we've got animals that once existed in the UK that we don't see anymore. And there's some very ambitious projects, and there's a lot of people really trying to influence, and a lot of organisations trying to influence what we could see back in the UK. There's all kinds of discussions that have taken place. But the bison one is certainly feasible in terms of building a reserve and assessing the current ecology of the landscape now as it sits without a large herbivore. So then looking at it 5-10 years down the line after large grazing herbivores have been put in place. Now, the exciting thing about this is we keep European bison at Wildwood now, and we keep them in a large area that's got lots of native trees, got lots of birch, chestnut, oak trees in and around that area. It's also got lots of non-native trees like western hemlock. And what we found, where we've opened up the habitat, the entire area for the bison, what they've done is killed off all the non-native trees. But all the native trees have adapted to them rubbing up against them and grazing on them, and they've thrived, they've adapted, they've coppiced, and they've grown. And so really what we'd like to do is put this out in a much larger landscape. We're talking probably about 150 hectares of mixed forest, including many native trees like your birch and your willows, oak, hornbeam, etc. But there's also a lot of non-native trees. There's Corsican pines in there as well. And we'd really like to try and see over a long time scale what impact the bison will have on the ecology of that landscape. what native species are going to come to the area as a result of the presence of bison. It's really important that when we're doing a study like that, we don't medicate bison out in that area. We want to keep it perfectly natural, so we won't be using wormers or anything on the ground. We want to see if dung beetles are going to exist, whether species that are really dependent on bison dung are going to thrive. That's going to bring in other species as well. We know that looking at the Netherlands project that's been operational now since the 90s, we know that what they've done is opened up areas of forest. They've opened up big areas of grassland, and there's coppices in between it. And we now see, as a result of that yellowhammer have come back, turtle doves are thriving in those areas, the deer have moved in, the rabbit population, hares, a range of different species that never existed in the habitat beforehand have all really started to come back and flourish in an area because of the way that bison have changed the landscape. And that is something we're really pushing at the moment.
That's crazy. The promotion of the introduction of a new large herbivore species like the bison has promoted so much other herbivore species to exist, like to coexist with them. Because I was thinking that one of the big bonuses of you introducing bison might be that it disperses large areas of deer population, which are obviously a massive issue for people. Might not understand. People might not understand if you're listening. Obviously, I have lots of friends who listen who are just like jiu-jitsu players or MMA fighters, and they're not into wildlife. They'll listen to a podcast like this because they find it interesting. But big deer populations are a massive problem for young trees and saplings, etc. So I was thinking that the introduction of bison would possibly disperse large groups of deer, which would help promote the species that are native to grow.
Yeah, and I think, Wes, in time we'll probably understand that a little bit more. We'll probably be able to understand how deer species will move on as a result of bison activity. Not entirely sure at the moment. We're doing ecological assessments at the moment to see what exists, within that current landscape, and then that will be monitored year on year just to see. It's all very aspirational at the moment, but the plan is what we'd like to do is then study year on year as the herd evolves and grows. What impact that has had, and that might be on the dispersal of deer species. It might mean that species like fallow deer, for example, really can't tolerate the same kind of habitat. Bison are extremely territorial as well, so there is that element too that might mean that actually they don't want the competition for food and space, and they'll disperse deer that way. So it's really a matter of us doing something fairly unique, certainly in the UK, and taking on board a lot of those studies that have taken place across the Netherlands and Wildwood in Poland that have been doing this for a very long time, with free living bison in huge forested areas. And this is it'll be a first for the UK, but something that's very exciting.
So how long would say the bison have been a feature in the UK, or would they never been really here since the European continent broke up? They would have never really existed here.
Quite possibly. There's no fossil records in the UK of European bison or the wisent, as we otherwise know it. So there's no fossil records of the species. But there is a very strong likelihood that they would have existed here. We know that the auroch would have done, which was a predescendant of the European bison. But we know that large herbivores have existed across the UK and helped sculpt the landscape and across all of Europe. So we feel that it's a great opportunity to try and bring that back. And of course, subsequent to then, we've introduced an awful lot of non-native trees all across our countryside for a range of different purposes. A lot of the forest areas here are made up of Corsican pine and western hemlock, which were grown for paper and they were grown for matchstick production during the First and Second World Wars. Now, they become a bit of a monoculture, and what we've seen with bison as a natural herbivore, it's not just the grazing or the browsing of them, perhaps I should say, it's the rubbing up against them and stripping the bark off that's felled all of these trees. So I think having a large herbivore within the area, within this landscape, that will help bring the forest back to what it should look like, and then hopefully bring the species back that should be there. And it's going to be a big study. We're going to be doing this in conjunction with various university studies as well, just to make sure that we're fully understanding the impact that we have as an organisation and with the Wildlife Trust, and the impact that bison will have, providing this all goes ahead. But we're planning for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where even if it, say you do the research and it turns out it's not feasible, just the research in itself was worth doing to understand what our options and alternatives are. So just that project in its own, like, I'm excited hearing about it, it does sound really exciting. And the other one that you mentioned was wolves. Do you have much to do with the wolf reintroduction, or do you?
Not personally, and I think that wolves across is such a controversial subject, and I think that a lot of reintroductions as well, or introductions, or rewilding, wilding projects, whatever terminology you prefer to use, I think there's a lot of controversy around a number of them, particularly around predatory species. When I say controversy, it's probably a large element of fear around them, which often comes as a result of poor communication, lack of engagement with the kind of communities that would perhaps be very fearful of a wolf introduction or even a lynx introduction, particularly farming communities. I think that they need to be engaged very early on if there's any talk of wolf reintroductions in Britain, particularly in England. I find it hard to believe that there is any suitable enough habitat of significant space to really warrant a wolf introduction. It pains me to say it because I'd actually love to see it, but that's speaking as a naturalist and biologist, like many of us, yourself included. We love wildlife. We're very much into nature and animals, and I'd love to think that it would be possible to introduce wolves. I can't see it. I don't know how that would be possible. I think it would certainly solve a lot of our deer issues that you spoke about earlier. I think that'd be a good one. But what we are seeing on a more realistic scale is really achievable projects with small carnivore species, and we've seen huge success. I say huge success, but ongoing success of the Pine Marten project, the release project in the Forest of Dean, and I think that should be absolutely applauded. And that the way they've gone about that, and we've been involved in some of the tracking of those animals. So some of the team here spent a couple of days in the Forest of Dean doing some of the tracking of the animals. They've all got GPS collars. But what's been really, I think, interesting about that is how all of the project involved local gamekeepers and the farming community and to some extent the shooting community, people who've got their eyes on the ground that understand the countryside, rather than alienating them or making assumptions about how people might feel about it. They brought them on board, and you've got gamekeepers phoning up to say, actually, we've seen a pine marten in this area. It could be a problem to what we're doing. And you can understand how that might be the case. But instead of taking their own measures to manage that situation, they're engaged, they're communicating. Those animals can be relocated to a more appropriate area where they're not going to cause agricultural damage or damage to whatever a gamekeeper is trying to achieve at that point in time. And I think that engagement with all members of the community from very early on is critically important. It's very important where you're talking about potentially either dangerous animals like bison, or you're talking about predatory species which could have an impact on what farmers and gamekeepers are trying to achieve as well, because you won't work successfully if you alienate extremely valuable stakeholders, and there's no question of that. And I think that we're seeing more and more how that has been a valuable lesson. I think it's realistic to be looking at wildcats. I think there's no question that they're looking at wildcat introductions again in Scotland. That will broaden out at some point. I think that will be the next predatory carnivorous species that will be introduced. No question. Of course, white-tailed seagulls seem to be doing pretty well across the Isle of Wight as well, I think. Carnivorous and predatory species, there's always going to be some controversy around that. It's going to worry people, but if you get that engagement element right and actually bring that knowledge that these people have into the fold, then you can have a really collaborative, successful project that everyone's proud of.
Yeah, I agree. It's, what seems to be the case is people in your situation people in my situation who can understand and see both sides of the coin, from hunting perspective, from gamekeeping, from agriculture, from there. Of course, there's going to be this contentious crossover where the two meet, and there's always going to be those elements that make it a bit contentious, and then you're going to get the people who handle that wrong, the rogue gamekeepers, the idiots, the poachers, but what you get a lot of the time is these far extremists who want to scream like, no hunting, no this. And I don't think they really understand or respect what impact that will have on rewilding, on wildlife conservation, to get rid of the people who spend most of the time outdoors and in these environments. If you alienate these people, the people who are sat at home, the keyboard warriors, are the ones complaining and kicking up the fuss. They're not there. They're not putting back into these conservation projects. So the fact that yourself and your team will work so closely with them is great promotion for every aspect. You know, I mean, of course, there's always going to be ethical issues with, is hunting sport? Should you kill stuff for sport? And, you know, like, that comes down to ethics and morals, and a lot of the time understanding, and a lot of people don't understand. And it's not up to me or anyone else to say, no, your morals are wrong because you don't like things being killed. Well, no, that makes me an idiot. Nobody should like things being killed.
That's
like,
right.
Things dying and killing things is just a side of hunting. It's not hunting. Killing things is not hunting. That's part of hunting. And people who don't understand generally get confused. And then to see someone like yourself, I mean, obviously I know you very well. I know you're pro hunting. And I know obviously the efforts that you've made into wildlife and conservation are second to none, really. So the fact that someone like yourself can say that openly, hopefully people will start to listen to that. People just don't like being wrong. I know people don't like being wrong, but
no, they don't.
People can hear that, and they can take that on board and see that there are elements to this where everyone works together for the benefit.
Well, I think that's it, Wes. And I think in any community at all, you're going to get people that you will fundamentally not agree with what they're doing. I mean, I fly hawks, as you know, and I hunt hawks, and as a falconer, and you know that is part of countryside life. Other people do different things. People go shooting. I don't particularly, but that's down to them. As long as people are respecting what they're doing, and the majority of the time, and I've said this previously, you know, gamekeepers get a very, very hard press a lot of the time, sometimes justifiably. There's no question of that in my mind at all. However, on the side of the coin, you always hear negative press before you hear anything positive. And it won't surprise me if it's the first time that you've been hearing that gamekeepers have been very supportive of pine marten releases, because you don't hear it. You'll hear that a bird's been shot or a bird's been found dead. You don't hear the positive side of it, because people like to tell a negative story before they'll tell a positive one. And I think it's very, very important that we engage in countryside projects. Conservation projects are invariably, 9 times out of 10, are countryside projects. And to do them well, you need to embrace those people working in and around the countryside that may do things entirely different to yourself. They might do things that you wouldn't do, or you don't necessarily agree with, but you have to respect the knowledge and not alienate it, and bring that on board. Because actually there's a lot of people within a hunting community that are fantastic conservationists as well. And I think you can't, the two aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, lots of people don't understand that, and it's one of my biggest grievances. Look, this is my biggest issue with Chris Packham. Is Chris Packham will so vehemently berate and post the people who are doing stuff wrong, the gamekeepers who are caught shooting stuff, and the poisoning of hen harriers, blah blah blah. But he's very, very reluctant to promote the gamekeepers who are helping, the side of pheasant shooting that contributes back. So all of these things, he very rarely will you see him promote that side of things, but he will vehemently stamp on the people who are doing stuff wrong, which those people do deserve that. But at the same time, let's represent both sides of the coin. Chris Packham is in a situation I don't think he respects how lucky he is, in that he has a voice of authority to millions when it comes to conservation and British wildlife. But then you have to be a little bit, stand out a little bit, and you have to say, listen, I need to promote also their side of this sport, their sides of falconry, their sides of shooting that are doing good for wildlife. And I'm in a position that I can help the layman or the average person understand that. And that's one of my grievances with him, my biggest grievance, because he'll happily post pictures of dead badgers left outside his gate and stuff, which is disgusting. It's terrible. It shouldn't be happening. But at the same time, I want to see something positive from you now, back from the hunt to the hunting to the hunting fraternity. Let me see something positive. Let's get these people behind you, because there are people like me who support you. You shouldn't be getting people putting dead badgers and stuff outside your house. I support you, but then let's have a little bit of something back now. You know, you're in that position. Let's have something back. You know.
Well, I think it's an interesting one, because there's no question that he's a Marmite character, and people like him or they absolutely don't. I mean, it's interesting for me because I guess I have tremendous respect for some of the things he's done. There is no question of that. You know, for someone who loves wildlife and particularly migratory birds, you know, watching Chris Packham go out in Malta and really hammer home what was happening there to songbirds and raptors on migration, which is absolutely appalling. No one's doing anything about it. And he, you know, guy's got some balls. He went out there, did that, and I have tremendous respect for him for doing that. I certainly agree in terms of some of his messaging. I think he's very quickly alienated a lot of people that live in and around areas near species that he'd like to conserve, and I think there's probably far better ways of communicating that. But you know, he's a naturalist and biologist who has done some outstanding things, but unfortunately he has certainly alienated a lot of people as well, and I think that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, if someone keeps giving me a platform and I keep representing it one-sidedly, I think someone should have to pull me to the side and say, listen, you need to. But you know, people, like, I guess when you get to that level and you're, I guess, looking after your status as a celebrity and stuff is probably also your most important thing. Looking after your job on the BBC, that's going to be more important possibly than the message sometimes, because that's the way that it feels. I mean, I don't know Chris at all, obviously, and like I said, I can't say enough good things for what he's done in the way of good things that he's done. But those certain things for me are bad enough or do have a negative enough impact that they need raising, especially with him, because I think someone who's in this industry should be open-minded enough to say, actually, I'm being a bit of a dick here. I'm representing very one-sidedly. I do need to address, and just every now and again, just address a little something, just address the way falconers are contributing, or address the way the shooting industry is helping with this. Anything, you know, just a little something, a little token here and there, just to let people see that actually he's not as one-sided as you would believe, because he may hate the badger, dead badgers outside of his house and all those sort of things.
Oh, we all hate that. I hate that.
Course. Yeah, of course, yeah. But at the same time, your stance is also promoting the anti side of things, and some of the stuff that these antis get up to at fox hunt, replicated fox drags and stuff. Some of the stuff that they get up to is horrendous as well, and it's promoted by this sort of behaviour. And I think that everyone needs to step back. The people who are abusing the fox ban need bringing into line. 100. I've never been fox hunting in my life. I don't have any support for fox hunting. I'm not against fox hunting. I don't know enough about it, but I don't support it in any way, shape, or form. But I think anybody who's abusing one side or the other, there needs to be this middle ground, and someone in that position is the perfect person to represent that better, you know?
Well, I do. And I think it's an interesting point you raise in that looking at how conservation and saving species is it's so much more than just being passionate about one element of what you do. I think there's an awful lot that can be learned. Falconry for me is, I think there's an awful lot that can contribute from falconry into active conservation. And I've chaired the Falconiform Taxon Advisory Group for European Zoo Association since 2011. I did that, and I've gone to various meetings with Vulture Conservation Foundation, various different projects where they're looking at releasing birds back into the wild, critically endangered or endangered species. Some of them have been tremendously successful. If you look at the Eurasian Griffon Vulture project, you look at what they've done from Jerez Zoo, they've bred and released vultures. If you want to see vultures in the wild now, Spain is your go-to country. Now, that's partly sad in that, obviously, Asian populations we know have declined so significantly. African populations are seeing very similar trends due to diclofenac, due to poaching, etc., a range of different things. But Europe has got a huge amount of vultures now. There's 25,000 pairs flying around between the Sierra Nevada mountains. You can see them in Spain. You go up there, I remember sitting in a bar in Jerez having a beer, just sitting out on a cobbled street, sunny day, just watching vultures flying from one mountain range to another.
I have videos thermaling with vultures in the Pyrenees. I have videos of me sharing thermals with 15, 20 vultures. And many times when I'm flying in those areas, I'm constantly looking out for vultures to share thermals with.
How amazing! What an experience! And I think that a lot of these, it's really positive that we're seeing all of these numbers now across Europe. You hear a lot about the successes, but some of the failures that have happened, or some of the things that haven't gone so well, you think, actually, do you know what? If a falconer had been doing this, if a good falconer had actually been doing this release, they'd have got it right. They'd have done it better. And the reason I say that is that there's techniques that a lot of falconers have used, like tame hacking, like ensuring the bird is fit before it goes on migration, that a lot of conservationists, they're looking at what this bird is. It's hatched from an egg. I'm thinking specifically of Egyptian vultures in this particular example. Hatch them out, they incubate them, put them in an aviary or on the release site, which is great. So they're seeing all of the area they're going to be released in. Then they're released, but they're being released pre-migration, and the birds aren't fit enough to make the migration, which is a huge problem. Whereas I think perhaps a falcon might think of that in very different terms. I think there's an awful lot that could be crossed over in terms of getting birds physically fit and physically conditioned to make the kind of journey. Just thinking about the entire process and having a bird at a release site, yeah, that's fantastic. It's great. It's seeing the environment. It's learning the wind on a hilltop aviary, all of those things. But actually, what could we learn from falconry? We know full well that GPS transmitters have been largely trialled by falconers. We looked at harnesses and collaring, but actually some of the training, the free flight, the conditioning of birds to come back. I was really, really lucky last year working in Arizona at the Californian Condor Project up on the Vermilion Cliffs, and actually getting those birds recalling back in for the carcass into the aviary. So a lot of training techniques there, and I think there's a tremendous amount of crossover between falconers today, good falconers today, and trainers, within the zoo community, and active in situ conservation projects. I think there's an awful lot of crossover. Some of it happens. There could be an awful lot more. I think there's a lot of experience on both sides that could really benefit.
Yeah, I agree. So, this is where you're at now, pretty much. What was your route, mate? How did you how did you find yourself in the industry? What did you work your way up? Were you a keeper? How did you get to where you are, and what was the path?
So I guess for me, like many of us, I just had an absolutely lifelong obsession with animals, particularly with reptiles, birds and invertebrates. I've owned fish and amphibians. I was always really, really interested in largely predatory species. So always fascinated as a child, like many of us, turning over rocks and stones and all these kind of things. did the usual school stuff, still maintained my interest. I'll tell you, I'm going to come across to your listeners as very sad here, but going on the lads' holidays to Ibiza, I was the one getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to climb up a mountain looking for snakes while everyone else is still in bed from the night before. So that gives you an indication of how sad I actually am and always have been. But I used to love that. I thought it was great. Get some 8 hours of solitude, catching big Argiope spiders and catching some vipers up on mountainside. I spent a lot of my childhood holidays doing things like that. I studied biology at university, so in London. I did my degree in animal biology specifically, and during that time, long before that time, I was at university in '94. Before then, I was flying birds. I had my own common buzzard, and then did a route that many people do. Had a Harris hawk, which I kept for a very, very long time. I bought him off a mutual friend, Sean Taffs, actually. I think. Blimey, back in the very early '90s, and that bird, he was going strong. He went to a falconry centre a couple of years ago, actually, in his retirement years. But during that period, I saw, I think it was about 1998, London Zoo were looking for staff to do their work on their bird displays. And I had an interview with a guy who's a very good friend now, Andy Hallsworth, who worked with quite a lot, done a lot of travelling with him to various collections as well. So I worked there for a season. During that time, funny enough, I'd actually had an interview with Nick Fox at Hunting Falcons International. During the time my career at London Zoo, the contract was coming to an end. I'd actually formally been offered a position there back in the late '90s with Nick, and at the same point in time, London Zoo came back to me and said, "Look, we want to offer you a full-time position working in the newly developed invertebrate collection," which was a huge interest as well. I took that position. I stayed at the zoo. Blimey, I mean, in total, I was at London Zoo on and off for 21 years. So I stayed there, went back to the animal training team, ended up managing the animal training section for the zoo for quite a long time. For about I think 7 or 8 years, I ran the animal activities team. I think you came up with your daughter Wes on at least one occasion. So I looked after that, and then when the zoo manager retired, I was offered the position of taking over as the zoo manager at London. And then, actually, do you know what? Before that, there was a step. So before that, I was actually a friend who I lived with at university and who I'd worked with at London. He was running field projects in Ecuador, and he asked me to come in as a bird and reptile biologist. So I actually left the zoo during that period in between managing the animal training team and then managing the zoo itself. I went out and did a stint in Ecuador. So I was running field projects out there for quite a long time, which was absolutely amazing. Got to see a harpy eagle grab a saki monkey from a tree, which was something stay with me for forever. You know, that's one off the bucket list. Ornate hawk eagles, saw plenty. You know, caimans. Never saw a jaguar, saw lots of footprints. But tapir, macaws, toucans, taira, you know, such a range of amazing species. And it was really interesting. Sorry?
How long were you there?
I was there for 5 months.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, but it was a remote place. You know, I've got an interesting story about it. It was we flew into Quito, then we flew. The Ecuadorian army took us off to a drop-off point along the Rio Curare, and then we got in canoes, and we were on canoes for another 8 hours or so to this point in the middle of the rainforest. We estimated it would take about 2 months to get to the nearest civilization if we were to walk. So it was an amazing place. I remember, and I'll never forget this. And my colleague at the time, Nick Beale, I hope he remembers it as well as I do. But I had to give a lecture to all the volunteers that were out there on how to avoid being bitten by anything you don't want to get bitten by. And in Ecuador, in the Amazon,
which is anything.
It's pretty much anything. The bloody trees bite you, given half a chance. They've all got thorns up them. You've got these thing called these bullet ants, which for any of your listeners, they might want to Google those. But I remember being told you get stung by one of those, you're going to know about it. And I got stung on the ear by one, and I went completely deaf for 48 hours. It was a horrendous thing. But I remember giving this lecture. There were two things I really had to point out, which was one was venomous snakes, specifically fer-de-lance, which were pretty much everywhere. I would spend a lot of time removing them from camps, but one of the main things you do is there's lots of logs in the rainforest, as you'd imagine. You step on them, don't step over them, because you never know what's the other side. And the other thing that will stick with me forever was telling people how to avoid getting bitten by vampire bats. Now, the vampire bats are quite prevalent in the area. Most people get bitten in one of two places, either on their foot or on their nose. And the reason for that is that they hang off your mosquito nets. So a lot of the indigenous people that we stayed with had long sticks, and they'd hit the nets if they were sleeping under them. A lot of them didn't, to keep the bats off of them. And I'd given this lecture to everyone about how to avoid it. And that night, about 3 a.m, Nick Beale, he was the project leader, woke me up and said, "I think you've been bitten." And I remember looking down, and I had this, it was just a white sheet, and it was just red. And I thought, Christ, because you know about vampire bats, they've got an anticoagulant in their saliva. They anaesthetise you by licking it first, so you never feel anything. And I'd actually been bitten on the foot, but the blood had crept up my legs. And the first thing as a bloke that you're going to look at is make sure your vitals are still there and intact, which thankfully I'm very pleased to say.
There's no milk from there, mate. There's no way there. Not even a vampire bat's going to feast on that.
Yeah, it's true enough. And so anyway, long story short, I've been bitten by this vampire bat, and I remember waking up and saying to Nick, what's the crack? What do we do? He said, well, really, we ought to get on the satellite phone, get you out so you can have your post-exposure rabies vaccines. Oh man, I don't really want to do that. So I said to him, what would you do if it was you? And he said, if it was me, I'd just leave it. Don't worry about it. Bandage it up, and we'll tell everyone what happened, how to avoid themselves. So that had been the plan of action. About 6 weeks later, we were out there, and I saw Nick kick out in his sleep. And I turned my head torch on, and he'd been bitten by a vampire bat. And I said to him, Nick, you've got a vampire bat on your foot, and there was blood coming out everywhere. And he leapt out of bed and said, quick, get the radio, get the satellite phone. I've got to get out of here and get my exposure. I went, you know what you can do with that, don't you? So I went for a very long walk for about 12 hours with the satellite phone, just to absolutely guarantee that if I had it, he had it too.
Amazing. You've never caught anything out in these places, and malarias or anything like this? Never anything?
No, I've been very lucky. I've been with people who had leishmaniasis, which was awful, terrible situation. I was with I had one of the guys on the camp actually got bitten by bot fly or robber fly. Oh. Awful, and he had he had a shaved head, and you could see the little black spots, and you can do one of two things. You put Vaseline on it, and they put out an air tube.
Suffocates it, doesn't it? Yeah. That's
right. Yeah. No, so I never thought I'd spend my time pulling maggots out of some guy's head, but I had to end up doing that as well, which was quite interesting. But no, I've not really not had anything really significant. Been bitten by plenty of things, as you can probably imagine. It's usually just either resulted in stitches or something or nothing, but certainly no nasties, not as yet.
Sounds amazing, though. Sounds amazing.
It is. It's an absolutely unique place, and I remember being told before I went to the Amazon that if you've ever been to Kew Gardens, you get a really strong smell of peat and tropical plants, and as you get off the plane in Kita, you can smell it. You can smell the rainforest. It's just incredible. Yeah, it's just you just smell peat and like compost. You can smell it from hundreds of miles away. It's just an amazing place, and I think it needs to be cherished and looked after. We hear so much about deforestation. You can see it flying over on the plains. You can see like a line literally in the sand where trees have come down, and then you hit this dense canopy, and it's an incredible place. And I'd urge anyone who has the opportunity to go to definitely take the opportunity.
Is it as uncomfortable as it's perceived to be on TV and stuff, like with the humidity and the moisture? Yeah. Is it as uncomfortable as you think?
You get used to it. It is initially. I think in terms of the temperature, it's not as bad. It remains a stable 28 degrees. So it's 28 degrees morning, evening, nighttime. You welcome the rain. You welcome a breeze. But yeah, you know, it's hot at night time. I think it's hard to eat. It's a very difficult terrain. We were in the eastern foothills of the Andes, so it's quite an undulating terrain. I mean, I'll put it like this, Wes. I could do with being on a diet at the moment. I was down to 70 kilos when I was in Ecuador. So you lose a lot of weight. It's a very physical environment. And yeah, it is uncomfortable. It's hard work. There's never enough food to make you feel full, because everything you're doing is burning off an awful lot of energy. But at the same time, you're watching toucans and howler monkeys, and you're seeing squirrel monkeys. You've got capuchins, spider monkeys. You know, for a naturalist, you know, I really enjoy speaking to Nigel King about his trips to Africa. I can listen to it all day. Unfortunately, if you're with him, you do have to listen to it all day. All day. But yeah, I keep threatening to go, and I'd love to go to Africa. I'd love to experience that. But at the same time, any naturalist, anyone with an interest in wildlife, love to get them to South America, because it's outstanding. It's just.
I mean, one of my biggest regrets was not taking the job out with Mark when he offered it to me. And then subsequently Nige went out there, but Mark offered me a job out there, and I got offered a fight at the same time, and I stayed and took the fight. And had I have known obviously what was going to happen with Mark and stuff, I would have 100% bit his hand off and gone for 3 months. He's just offered me 3 months. He's like, mate, come out for 3 months. I need some help because I've got it's Black Sparrow season, and we're going to be getting lots of stuff coming in, and I've got a new eagle that needs work. Come out, it'd be brilliant to have you. So I was meant to go. Nige had sorted it all out for me, and then I got offered this fight, and I took the fight, and then lo and behold, like, God rest Mark's soul, what happened with Mark, you know, it just would have been the perfect time. Now I do still want to go to South Africa. I was meant to go last year for a paragliding competition, but that would have been to go there and work so closely with specifically birds of prey, which is, if I'm ever to be considered knowledgeable about anything, I guess birds of prey would probably. So yeah, it's a regret of mine, definitely, but not me and Nigel and I said we're going to go all the time. So hopefully when this is all over, Nigel and I'll get out there, and maybe you as well. Would you go out for a couple of weeks, little safari or something? It'd be absolutely brilliant. But again, I remember a few years ago I watched a TV show. It was called Lost Land of the Volcano, and it was like Steve Backshall, Gordon Buchanan, and who's the old white bearded guy who's the insect guy? Oh, he's got glasses. He's on all of those programs like Lost Land of the Volcano, etc. He's a biologist. I can't think of his name. Anyway, him as well. Great program. They did another one called Lost Land of the Tiger as well, where they went to track down a tiger that lived on top of a Tibetan mountain, which they didn't think was there. And I watched these programs. I'm like, Steve Backshall, that's me. That's what I should be doing. Like, he's a former judo champion. His job is exactly. I don't think there's anything that I do right now that I wouldn't give up to go and film a series or two of like Lost Land of the Volcano somewhere. You know,
you'd be good at it.
It would be amazing. It would be absolutely the ideal thing for me. Definitely, I would love it. So yeah, I would getting over to the rainforest. I would absolutely love just because. On their first day, I think their first 24 hours, they discovered something like 8 or 12 species that had never been. I would just be like a 6-year-old kid walking into the pick and mix at the cinema, just like literally like. I just know I would. So yeah, I think your advice for people to go. I think I need to stop promoting for other people to go, and I need to actually get off my ass and go.
You'd have an absolute whale of a time out there, and I think any naturalist, anyone with an interest in wildlife, you know, there's something for everyone, particularly the birds of prey. I think absolutely breathtaking. You've frozen. You still with me?
Yeah, mate. Don't hang up. We will come back, I'm sure.
Hey.
We're back, are we? It happened the other day as well. Yeah, so we're all good. Connections all good now?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. Brilliant, mate. Okay, so yeah, so that was your route into the being at London Zoo. What's your advice for people who want to get into zoology or working in within a zoo, mate? I think it's probably, I would imagine, a high turnover of staff in that sort of job.
Well, do you know what? It's not. It's a very, very low turnover. I think that's what presents a lot of the challenges for individuals. You know, I was at London Zoo for 21 years, and there are still people there that looked at me as a newcomer. You know, it's yeah. You know, it's I've got there's a guy there, Matt Hennessy. You'd have a great deal of time for him. He was an old bare knuckle boxer, tough old boy. But you know, he's coming up for 40 years or 45 years at the zoo. You know, and it's not unique. It's got a very low turnover because people who work with animals, there's limited. Relatively limited fields or opportunities to get into it. So no, I mean I've got staff here at Wildwood that have been here since its inception, really, and it's quite a low turnover. My advice to anyone is learn about it, but actually come and talk to people doing the job as well. Come and spend some time. Volunteering is without a doubt probably the greatest way to get involved in some of these jobs, because you're a known quantity. You've shown a lot of the qualities that are required for professional animal work, certainly in terms of commitment, dedication, not getting much money to work very hard, all of those things. And actually, you often hear one of the questions, and I get asked it an awful lot, is can you look at my CV? Can you see, am I doing the right thing? Well, actually, do you know what? I have to say that hard work and passion and dedication get you everywhere in animal work. And you can go to university. I had keepers that done their PhDs, doctors, and probably far more qualified than I was. But equally, the majority have come in through volunteer routes. And actually, whether you've got your degree, whether you've got your master's or PhD, your experience and your commitment will get you a very, very long way. And I'd say the majority, and by majority, certainly over 60% of the keepers that I'd recruited had come in from a volunteer background.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to how many species, like within the zoo, keeper wise, will be very much dependent upon those certain keepers, so you get certain animals that work with, I guess, for the display side of things. Specifically, that's very important. Certain birds that will only work with certain people, or certain marsupials that will only work with certain people, etc. That's probably a big deal, is it?
Yeah, it certainly can be, and I think that it's why now you see more often than ever that within zoological animal collections you zone the keepers out, usually taxonomically. So you'd have a group of primate, you'd have a team specifically of primate keepers. You might have a team of carnivore keepers, of bird keepers, of animal trainers, of aquarists. Some of the skill sets, of course, are not that transferable either. So you couldn't just pull a keeper from somewhere to go and work in the reptile house or the aquarium, because the needs of those animals, the needs of all animals, are very specific. But certainly where you're looking at the environmental parameters that an animal has to sustain its well-being and its health, like within a vivarium, you've got very certain UV requirements, heat requirements. You can't just drag anyone over to come and look at that. So how you normally do it, and how we do it here, is we've got a team of carnivore keepers or dangerous animal keepers that will look after bison, wolves, bears, lynx, etc. And then we've got our bird team that will also do the demonstrations. We've got reptile keepers as well. So you by doing it that way, you limit those kind of concerns. They're usually focused around mammals, I have to say, where some species might not feed or might not recall as readily if you've got a different keeper trying to call them over. And of course, you've got all the health and safety issues as well. So working with big cats or bears particularly, you have a very specific dedicated team of staff that work consistently with those animals.
Yeah, I think one of the most mind-blowing exhibits that I've seen at London Zoo was the African wild dogs.
Yeah, sure.
They were incredible. They seem so unique to everything else that's in the zoo. They seem to behave a bit differently.
Yeah.
They seem so strange that that something so wild, so African, so wild is in that environment, and yet they remain like
Yeah.
you see the tigers and the lions at the zoo, and they seem almost tamed. You know, people fall and they think that they're tamed because they just laze about. But the African wild dogs still seem really wild to me when I see them.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair observation, really, Wes, because that they act in a wild way. Their movement is fluid as well. They move as one, as I'm sure you've seen. Now, Whipsnade's got a huge enclosure for their hunting dogs, but it's incredible. You know, even to the point if a pigeon lands in that enclosure. Yeah, there's a good chance they're going to catch it. They will hunt together. They use all the tricks of the trade. They'll use distraction. So you have two animals in one area, and then others will gang up and come in. So I mean, hunting dogs naturally just run down their quarry. That's what they do. They're built for stamina, and those things they can really run. You know, so you have to think of ways to expend their energy using zip wires with carcasses on it, whole carcass feeding that they have to pull off of something, and they're an amazing animal, absolutely incredible.
But so I guess this is another thing. I guess you do you find yourself having to justify animal captivity a lot, or do you find? I mean, I guess it does get like zoos and animal captivity does get frowned upon, and I guess
Yep.
and people underestimate the amount of animal enrichment that goes into a role of a keeper, or even I'm assuming here, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming you have meetings of enrichment for certain species and how you can replicate like similar wildlife enrichment. So, do you find that you have to justify that a lot not within the industry, but to people?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I think perhaps when I was working in more traditional zoos, yes.
Yeah.
I think here certainly less so. So where we are now, I'd love you to come and see it. It's a woodland. It's a native English woodland with native species. So you've always got the temperature parameters exactly spot on, or species that have existed in the UK in a forested environment in natural enclosures. So I think we tend not to get those comments here when I've worked traditionally in perhaps what we consider more traditional zoos. They're not. It's not common, but there's certainly comments that come up, and I think they're justified as well. I have to say that I think the word zoo is a very, very broad term, and it covers an entire range of extremely diverse facilities that hold animals. And if someone says to you, do you like a zoo? It's like saying, do you like a restaurant? You know, well, yes, some of them I do, and some of them I really don't. And it really comes down to that. For me, it comes down to demonstrating that the animals are in displaying natural behaviours, demonstrating that they're being provided with enrichment. And to answer that point, yeah, we've actually got a behavioural an animal behaviour committee that deal with animal training, conditioning for recall work, for veterinary procedures to try and eliminate anything ever being darted. We can do hand injection, and we've got an enrichment forum here as well. So very similar to the setup that we had at London, where you're looking all the time at how do we keep these animals interested, how do we enrich their lives, how do we ensure that their behaviour is as natural as it can be. And it's not only looking at those things, it's having an external influence to look at them as well. So rather than focusing with our own biases of what we might want to see, we have students externally doing their MSc projects either through Durrell, DICE or various universities or academic institutes that will study those animals completely free of bias and produce their publications on that so that we can learn. You know, it's a learning curve. But I think, you know, some of those comments from the public about animals in captivity are absolutely justified. If you see, if you go to a collection, you see an animal just bouncing off the walls or sitting in a sparse, barren bear pit with no enrichment or no remnants of the wild within it. It's extremely sad, and you see the best and the worst. And I think the term zoo encompasses everything from your really poor, archaic Victorian bear pits to some places in the world actively engaging with conservation programs, breeding for release, engaging in education and displaying the kind of enrichment and behavioural repertoires for their animals in their collections that you would hope to see. So that term zoo is really, really very broad, and I can certainly understand why there was opposition to it, all the time we don't reach the best in standards of welfare and ethics for a collection of animals.
Yeah, because whenever I go traveling, wherever I go in the world, my first port call is a zoo. I
Mine's
remember
not.
when I went to Amsterdam, and when we got off the train at Amsterdam, and was like, right, I was like, right, where's the zoo? And I was looking at, because I know Amsterdam reportedly got a great zoo, and as soon as I could, I looked up where the zoo was and planned to go there the next day. But you're in Amsterdam, like people are getting stoned and indulging in other activities, and I'm looking where the zoo is, and it's like, but like I've been to some zoos, and I've been there like, oh, this place makes me depressed. But I've been to other zoos, and I mean, I guess I'm. I look at things a bit different to a lot of other people because I've been fortunate enough to be friends with yourself and see the other side. And I know about all the good things that come from zoos. But yeah, I look at for someone a zoo. I want to go to the zoo. I want to see what the local zoo's like, and I'm just fascinated. Of course, you get the TV programs now, the zoo, and all these sort of things. Obviously, the Longleat program has been going for 20 years or something now. So obviously, people are interested in these things, and people must respect the good that these places are having. But then you get something like Blackfish that comes out, and of course has a massive impact. Did you notice any knock-on stuff from that because you were? I think when it came out, you were at London Zoo, I believe. Then
I was. That's correct.
Yeah. So did you? I guess I'm asking really. Do you get constant criticism from these sort of forums of that sort of thing, or did you watch that documentary? And is it something that you watch that documentary and you want to criticize the documentary, or you completely understood and it's a thought process that you've had for years, or within the industry that has had? Because people will see the Blackfish documentary and they'll assume, and I'm really being really broad here, I know. They'll assume, people will say that that's terrible. Everyone who works at a zoo supports this sort of stuff, and all zoos support this sort of thing. And I guess you don't. That's not what people support. They don't support enclosing big, massive mammals into tiny little swimming pools and stuff. So I guess it is. What I'm saying is basically what was your feedback, or what was the feedback from within the industry from something like Blackfish?
I think certainly within the industry, it's such an emotive topic, and it's again, Wes, it's like so many different subjects. I think people have their own individual opinions as to what is right or what is wrong, and I found certainly working in zoos for as long as I have, and doing European inspections as well, you get to meet a lot of people, and you meet people that very much like yourself and like Nigel and like a lot of my friends love animals. They love wildlife. They're fascinated by animals. Equally, you find within zoos, there's a lot of people that love zoos. Not so much about the animals, but they love everything that comes with that. The history of animals in captivity, dating back to the Victorian periods. And so you've got a lot of very diverse opinions. So I can't speak on behalf of an industry. I speak on behalf of myself. I don't like seeing orcas in captivity. I think I don't really, I understand why it's considered entertaining, but this is a huge migratory species that covers thousands of miles across the ocean within diverse temperature ranges, in a very specific social structure within a family group that we fail to provide in captivity. So to my point, I do struggle with that, actually, and I think it's right that even within the zoo environment, you're always challenging and questioning things. And people that work with me know my thoughts on a range of different animals in captivity, and it's not to say that they shouldn't be kept in captivity. It is to say that if you're going to keep them in captivity, like anything, understand the biology of the species and replicate it. If you know that you've got a species that, hunting dogs are quite a good example, that are extremely mobile. We know that they have a tremendous amount of stamina. That's how they obtain their food. They run down their prey items, and then they feed on it as a pack to a whole carcass. Then replicate that. understand it, and then replicate it as closely as you possibly can to ensure that that species is expending its energy, is behaving in a natural way, and you can interpret that. And actually carcass feed it, feed a whole deer carcass to it. You know, this is a real bugbear of mine, is that a lot of zoological collections think that the public won't necessarily want to see that. Well, actually, you're coming to see a wild animal. Let's show it behaving in a wild way and do exactly that. And, you know, I always found it staggering that people would be opposed to feeding a whole carcass to a pack of wolves. Well, of course, that's what they eat.
Yeah. I mean, one of my biggest bugs to bear at the moment is Facebook censoring images of wildlife killing, and like you'll see a lion eating an antelope, they're censoring it. A peregrine falcon eating a gull, they're censoring it. I'm like, this is insanity. We're censoring nature and wildlife.
Yeah. It's incredible.
There's I can't see any benefit. There's zero benefit to this at all. This promotion that this is natural and this is what happens is the way that we will save these species. Alienating that and making it something that people don't want to see, it's the quickest way to get rid of it, surely. I mean, I'm not stupid for thinking that way.
No, I don't think you are. I think you're absolutely spot on. It's an entirely educational tool. We want to demonstrate to, and my kids come out, you know, Aiden's 4 years old. Bill will help me prep up pigeons and get food ready for Birdie understands fully what animals eat and where food comes from. And it's critically important that he does and respects that as well. But censoring and hiding these things I can't understand it. I mean, I can't comment too much because I've actually been Facebook have censored me at the moment, unfortunately. So I'm on a ban from Facebook, so I can't actually see.
I know what you were censored for, so we'll brush over that one. But to be fair, the image you were censored for sharing is all over social media. That's not. Of
course it is.
That's what the whole thing started. For that purpose. I just don't. I mean, obviously, I go to the other extreme, and I don't believe there should be any censorship. I believe that the only way that people should be censored is through society and morality, because I think being embarrassed by the fact your peers think what you are doing is shit has much more of an impact than the government or a third party like Facebook saying you shouldn't do this. All you get then is rebellious, as opposed to me. Listen, the reason I don't post videos of people being raped is because I don't agree with people being raped. I think it's vile and I don't want to see them. I don't want to share them. I don't do it because I'm worried that Facebook will take my profile down. I do it because morally it doesn't stand well with me and I don't want any part of it. I don't go on Live Leak because I don't like videos of people getting their heads cut off. And it's not my thing. Like, other people want to watch it. That's fair enough. I don't want to ban Live Leak. I just don't want to have a part in it. And I think the moment that we take the moral standing and the morality out of it, we're starting then to get to a point where people aren't making a judgment on their morals and their ethics, and they're not building those moral and ethics. We're making a judgment on, what's going to happen to me if I do this, or what's so-and-so going to think of me? And I think it's wrong. Like, we got it all wrong.
Yeah, I can't disagree.
Especially around wildlife, I don't see the point in censoring wild activities. Like, I mean, there was that famous picture of I believe it was a peregrine that had ate the neck of a seagull, and the seagull was still alive. Did you ever see the picture?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, so the gull gets up and walks around with his neck fully exposed, like dessheathed and stuff. So and it was blurred and censored everywhere, and I was like, what you don't understand about this, okay, you could say it's cruel in as much as nature is cruel.
Yeah,
if you want to anthropomorphize it, you could say imagine how it feels and all these things. However, what you could also say is, wow, this is an incredible opportunity that a photographer was there to witness something like this happen, such an amazing event that may never get pictured anywhere ever again. Wow, what an incredible opportunity for us to have seen this in nature.
I mean, it must absolutely kill Facebook to not be able to cover everyone's eyes up should they see a peregrine or a sparrowhawk, in fact, killing a pigeon in front of somebody. It's not. It's life. You know. It's absolutely. It's life. You know. You
It's one of the
can't.
most incredible things,
Yeah.
parts of life, because it's so uncontrollable. There's so many great elements in life, as in sporting achievements, musical achievements, singers, theatre, art, incredible, like stuff that will impact you and has such a great cultural impact. And then there's other things that happen in life: shooting stars,
Oh
a
man.
sparrowhawk taking a magpie in the middle of a roundabout. There's all these things that happen. And
As Nigel drives off with his window open.
No, I said the sparrowhawk caught the magpie.
Oh, sorry.
And all these things happen, and these things happen thousands of times a day, and nobody witnesses them. So when you witness them, to not see the magnificence in it and celebrate that, we're robbing ourselves, surely.
Totally. And not only robbing ourselves, it's being robbed from us as well in some respects. You know, it's the kind of thing that you want your kids to see. It's life. And, you know, wildlife documentary, even I find now even a lot of wildlife documentaries censor out a lot of the actual killing and understanding. You lose the understanding of how a lion kills a zebra. You see it chasing, you see it hunting, you never get, you don't see an asphyxiation or anything like that. A lot of the time it's censored out, and it then leads to questions as how does a lion kill a zebra? Well, it gives you the opportunity to explain it, but what is the point of censoring out and only telling part of a story? You know, it's part of our life.
I watched a documentary the other day, and there was a peregrine caught a pigeon, and it was feeding its young. It was on this aerial, and it catches the pigeon, got it in his foot, and then the narrator says he even has time to start plucking the pigeon in the air. Of course, it wasn't plucking the pigeon. I think you can probably guess what it was doing. It was dispatching the pigeon. And I thought, what a great way to be able to explain the process of what it's doing, the fact that it's been given this amazing terminal tooth that it uses, quite unique. And you just robbed your audience of understanding that because you wanted to water down the fact that it's broken a pigeon's neck, which is crazy. Completely natural. I think, it really grates on me, that sort of thing, and it makes me wonder how much wildlife documentary we're going to lose once Sir David Attenborough's gone, because I think the amount of people who only watch wildlife documentaries, if they're narrated by David Attenborough, it makes me worry when it happens. What happens to wildlife documentaries?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it does. I mean, I've been talking about the Sir David's replacement over the last decade or so now. I don't know. I mean, he's what, 93 now?
Yeah.
You know, he's from his own well-being perspective, that's an awful lot of work to be doing for him at that age. I think that's how old he is. I'm not entirely sure, but even
he's
so,
93 or 94. 93 or 94. He's no younger than that. He's either 93 or 94.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible age. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been the voice of wildlife since we were kids, you know, and I don't know. I don't even like to think about it, you know.
And even the thing is, narration. Narration's quite a job, you know. Just sitting down and narrating a documentary like that is a lot of work. So it is. I do worry that because the amount of people who I still hear now say, "Oh, I can't watch wildlife if it's not David Attenborough," and then he releases something like Life or like Seven Wonders Project, and then bam, it smashes the previous one, and then the new Blue Planet comes out, and bam, it smashes the one, and you're like, what comes after? Because people just don't watch these things if they're not narrated by David Attenborough.
No, and it's absolutely true. I mean, I've been very, very lucky. I've worked with him 3 times now, and his all credit. He provides all the credit to this amazing team of photographers, videographers. The filming is absolutely astounding. You see the efforts they go into for it, but it's him. It's his voice overlaying on this amazing footage that just keeps everyone absolutely encapsulated. Is an astounding man, and you know what? Well, it's the voice of a generation, really, several generations.
I shared I was at a dinner with one of the producers of I think it was, what's the one? The one with the snakes when they were chasing down the lizards. What?
Oh yeah, you're talking about when they were in Madagascar, looking at the racers hunting the marine iguanas. Sorry, that was in the Galapagos, wasn't it?
But what was the name of the documentary?
Life.
That was Life, yeah. So I was talking to one of the producers, and she was saying that what they've done is they have a large catalogue of audio recorded just for afterwards, because they do not have a plan for afterwards. So they have a big catalogue of stuff recorded so they can produce for years and years and years posthumously of David Attenborough, which I thought that just goes to show the voice of a generation, the influence one man's had on us, you know.
Well, I think it's incredible. If you've read his book, I know you're a big reader. If you read Life on Air, if you haven't read it, you should.
I haven't.
Well, you should. It's all about David Attenborough, how he got into it, how he began doing this.
I'm going on Amazon while you speak. You have to keep him entertained, because I'm going on Amazon to buy the book right now.
I like it. Well, I think what you're going to do, I think, picking up from what they've done with David Attenborough's voice, are you going to do the same for your podcasts? Are you going to record thousands and thousands and go?
Mate, I can. I'll just be happy if people listen to this one.
So, they won't if they know it's weird. But yeah, it's an amazing book, and you'll particularly enjoy it because it just tells about, you know, he was BBC Two, wasn't he, for a long time? He was producer of BBC Two, and then just getting into it. And they said, I remember there's a section on there where he's told he'll never make television. He's got a face for radio, which is where that famous phrase kind of comes from. And then, of course, someone didn't turn in for work to do some narration. He took over, and then the rest is history. You don't need to buy it now, Wes. I've told you the plot.
There we go. That's it. That's that. You've just saved me 12 quid.
Boom.
No, mate, I've literally just pressed buy it now.
You'll love it.
This. So, I mean, obviously, you know, I read a lot, so I love it anyway. And I love, my genre is memoirs. I read everything. But I love a memoir, and I finished a book last night, so I'll start another one. Just by the time this comes, I should be in a position to start this one. I'm over the moon. So what about now that we've got the old COVID and stuff, mate? How's life for you at the moment? What are you doing? Are you still as much at work, or have you got a bit more free time? Or
so I can't say free time. I'm physically in the office just to support the teams here 3 or 4 days a week. What I am doing is taking the time to do a lot of planning, because we've got this, you know, we're starting to work towards this bison reserve. So I'm really just looking at planning that with our ranger team here, looking at fence lines, bison corrals, starting to collate the list of tree species that currently exist within the Blean woodland, where we're putting it. So doing a lot of research at the moment, I have to say, making sure that the teams here are absolutely operational. Obviously coming into our breeding season, so we've got a lot of different species. We've got 2 crane eggs at the moment. Ravens have built big nests. You and I will chat about ravens again. Wildcats, certainly looking to breed those. And then, of course, we've got the big project in Devon with the bear cubs coming. So for me at the moment, it's an awful lot of planning, designing. I've been, funnily enough, actually, the day that COVID was really announced and I was starting to do the lockdown, I was actually working at Artist Zoo in Amsterdam. I'd been there for a week, and scurrying back to the airport, we've been planning the collection planning process for owls in European zoological collections to optimise conservation, which was fantastic. But then it was a mad scramble back to the Eurostar as everything started shutting down. So it was a bit of a mad one. But yeah, no, busy. Work certainly is taking in a slightly different direction in that obviously a little bit more office based, and it's hard having meetings beyond Zoom or Skype because of all the social distancing. So a lot of the people that I'd normally be engaged with on a regular basis to start planning this work, you have to work around their availability. I think the difficult thing for so many people is the schools being shut. That's been the challenge, because you're relying on a huge network of people to come in and support all of this work. But as soon as they said they're closing the schools, I'm having Zoom meetings with kids running behind me, kids jumping on your ladders. People understand. It kind of breaks it up a bit, but that's been one of the big challenges, I think, for a lot of us is having to do the childcare bit.
Yeah, my brother was saying today. I saw my brother today, and he was saying that 2 days ago he went over to B&M Bargains, and he decided to take his 2.5-year-old because rather than leave him at home with the missus and the youngest, so he took him over. Got to B&M, and the woman said, "You can't bring him in. It's one person." He's like, "What?" He's like, "You can't bring him in. It's one person." He's like, "Well, what if I'm a single dad, or what if my wife's a key worker? What if she's an NHS nurse?" She's like, well, I guess I'll let you in this once." He was like,
how ridiculous.
How ridiculous is, like, the bloke behind, apparently the bloke behind him spoke up for him straight away, and then my brother's voiced his own opinion. But how ridiculous is that? Like, we're in a situation where it's a guy with a kid. You haven't had a family of 5 turn up.
It's crazy. People have got, and I think this is one of the things, you've seen some amazing acts of kindness and support within communities, and yet there is still an astounding lack of common sense from so many people.
Just can't teach it, can you? You just can't teach that common sense, mate. You just can't.
So we were watching a woman the other day, and there's actually a meme up on Facebook about it, where wearing these gloves at the supermarket and pulled it off with her teeth, and you think, are you insane?
Oh my.
Brilliant.
Yeah, but stop recording your missus, mate.
Well.
That's what got you taken off Facebook, wasn't it?
Yeah, it must have been, yeah. Something like that.
So these projects, mate, the ones the one in Devon, is that facility and facility is open to the public, and then that's just a project on the side. What facility is that down there, mate?
That's going to be, so we've got the Wildwood Trust Escott, which is on the Escott estate. Absolutely fantastic park, again, specialising, very similar to us. It's got big red squirrel walk-through enclosure. They again do a lot of red squirrel breeding. Lynx, European wolves, wildcats, of course, will be involved in a lot of the work there. But that's where we're looking at putting these bear cubs as well. So building this big internal woodland facility with the ponds and creating a bit more of a woodland for them as well. So yeah, that will be open to the public.
So the Wildwood project down there is already open to the public.
Yeah, that's open.
That's gonna be one of my first visits, I think, after this is over. With it being so close to me, I'm gonna have a pop down there and have a look at that and have a look at that facility. And then it's just nice to know now that this is coming with the bears, and have a look at everything being developed down there. So I'm gonna, because I've never been. Quite embarrassingly, I've never been down there. So I am going to, as soon as it's over, that's going to be one of my trips, is to get down to the Wildwood project down there. And then, of course, I'll be up to see you as well. We're long overdue a visit. So
make it happen.
Definitely come up and see you, and then get a curry. We'll maybe even get the fat bloke up as well and get a curry with him.
Perfect. Look forward to it.
But mate, listen, thank you very much for joining me. We would talk all day. I've got lots of things that I want to speak, other like species and stuff, and like British species, and what should we go in, what insects and what lizards do you think that kids should be knowing about in the UK? And I just made my
tiger beetles, mate. They need to know about tiger beetles. They've all emerged in the forest behind us. All these emerald tiger beetles, absolutely fantastic. Kids need to know about them.
Tiger beetles. And also, I tell you what I saw yesterday, which people should have a look at. Maybe don't touch it. Is a woodlouse spider.
Oh yeah.
How beautiful is a woodlouse spider?
Theatoda.
Yeah. How lovely is that, mate? So have a look. People should Google the woodlouse spider and the tiger beetle, and they should have a look at them. That's their homework from the back of this.
Good.
But other than that, mate, I'm gonna let you go. You're a busy guy. honestly, mate, thank you for joining me. It's been a
Pleasure.
pleasure, and we will do another one soon enough with lots of other stuff to talk about.
All right.
Until then, mate, is there anything that you want to mention, any shout-outs you want to give, or any projects you think people should look up? Anything at all you want to say before we go?
All I'd like everyone to do is stay safe and enjoy nature, enjoy wildlife, and have a look out your windows and see what you can see. You know, get out in your gardens and do things that you can do. But let's hear what you're seeing out there.
Nice one, mate. Thank you very much again, mate. I'll catch you soon.